My name is Bill Shelton. I'm the CEO of EOS, and I'm happy to be here. This is the next session of the Parity series, and this one will be on negotiation. This one was actually inspired by a lot of you who have asked for the different things that can helpful, and so we're going to really try this to be informal. We have a bunch of sports represented today, so I expect we should get some good questions. We have golf and track, rugby, hockey, biathlon, skeleton, luge, volleyball. So we should get some good questions. We're going to try to focus on topics that you all can use. So we're going to talk about 2 case studies in this. But before I start this, I want to ask a few of you, what do you hope to gain from this? So if you would, I'm going to call on a few of you. So I'll just start with 2 of you. Let's see. I see Jana, you're on this. What do you hope to get from this negotiation workshop?
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes, Ken.
Okay, great. First of all, obviously, personal development. I love learning new things and new skills, and I think negotiation skills, for me, up until this point, have been learned on the job, versus actual formal training. So, hoping to gather some insight from you on that. And I think the second part of that is when it comes to women's sport, I think in many cases, in my experience in negotiating and partnerships and different things, people sometimes want to offer sort of the low ball deal to try to say, we just want to support. And how do we encourage them to do more, try to get the best possible deal out of partners that can really have the greatest impact on your organization?
Mm-hmm. Those are very, very good questions. I hope to address that. On one of the ones that I'll be very specific is it's the slide on when you have power and when you don't, and then how do you use techniques in order to be still effective, okay? So we'll make sure to, when we get to that section, to try to give you some highlights.
Great.
Thank you, Jana. Let's see. How about you, Shannon? What do you hope to gain from this?
Hello. So for me, let's see, I am, because of the Olympic postponement, I'm going into a contract negotiation. And for me, being 36 and also a mother, I'm kind of not the typical athlete that Nike, which is my sponsor, has sponsored in the past. So trying to look for ways to leverage the skills that I have acquired in my 14 years as a pro to get a contract and to get a contract of a good value. And so trying to leverage different things than any of my previous contracts have kind of been focused on.
Okay. All right, I'm going to ask one more person, one more different sport. Tori, what do you hope to get from this session?
Hi, there is a number of things I guess I would like to get, but I'll keep it simple. I have been a pro soccer player now for 9 years, and I've never actually had an agent. So I've had to negotiate a lot of, I'd say negotiate loosely, because oftentimes the club just tells you what they will give you, and you kind of have to take it with the way our contracts are written now. But I would like to learn how to kind of value the intangibles that I bring to the club and to the team, and how that kind of fits into my overall contract in the leadership role that I'm expected to play on my team as well.
Okay, all of those are good things, and I hope that you're able to get some of those things. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and how I got some of this. I've been formally trained in some of these areas, and some of it is just based upon experience. I'm an engineer by training. I did a number of years down south as a petroleum engineer before going to business school at the Darden School. And there I learned a lot in negotiating class and stuff like that. So that's really where most of my formal training came, and then on the job training. And I will, I'll start by saying that negotiation is, everybody always thinks that it's some complicated thing, but you'll find out, what I'm going to try to teach you today, a lot of it just goes with preparation and being ready. and then and a bunch of other focus areas. So I want you all to be very open-minded and don't think, well, Bill, it's just because it's you, you have a big personality that you can do it. I do have a big personality, but that doesn't prevent anybody. Sometimes that's even a disadvantage in terms of negotiation. So I try to change up depending on who I'm negotiating, when I have the power and when I don't. And I'll try to share some of those things right now. So now I'm going to get started. Okay, can everybody see this?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I want to start out with something that is really important. It's really not what you're worth, but what you negotiate. A lot of people try to make these things and they get personal and they feel like, wow, they're offering me low things, therefore I have low value. That couldn't be farther from the truth. People want to pay you, but they all want, you have to give them reason. So in this session, I'm going to go over 6 things that I think will help you better negotiate. These are focus areas that really can almost help in any type of negotiation, whether it's a sponsorship deal or a purchase deal. So we're going to focus on 2 real world examples. Now, I want us to be clear here, ask questions. This is for you all. And so if there's something that's not clear that you want me to delve into a little bit more, please do that. The second thing is that this is going to be a lot of information. So if it's information that you like, what we will do after in future sessions, break it up into smaller groups and smaller different on the focus areas. So the things that you should focus on in a negotiation are, first is importance. That's the value you place on it and the cost to acquire. So if it's something that's of high value to you and it's expensive, then of course you're going to spend a lot more time. The second is preparation. Again, the more time that you spend on this, it should be equate to something that's important to you. A critical thing is recognizing when you have the power or not. And Jana, that's something that I'm going to come to, and kind of you change your negotiation strategy when you have the power and you're not. And you would not believe the things that you can get, and sometimes by being able to do that. Before you start any negotiation, you should know your walk away. So what is the minimum requirements that you want to do in order to engage in this negotiation? That's crucial because you want to do this prior to entering this. Emotions. This is also, I will say, for people in disenfranchised groups, for women, for African Americans, this can be, we're often devalued, and that devalued can come across and make us emotional. Yes, you will have gender bias in your negotiation against you. Yes, I may have racism against me, but don't let that come through in your negotiation. Now, the caveat to that is sometimes when you realize that you have no power at all, we're going to show how to use that in order to invoke an emotional response so that you can get something when you really don't have any other power to do this. And the last thing that we're going to talk about are deadlines and how to use those in your negotiations. Okay. So the first example we're going to start with is negotiating with a shoe company. And, there's a broad landscape of different shoe companies, but I tried to put several on here to just kind of to illustrate sometimes when you're dealing with a Nike or an Adidas, you will likely almost have to accept the conditions that you're given. New brands give you more flexibility, right? So part of what you're going to want to do, even if you think you know who you want to be with, be open-minded, because you can then often get learn different things, and that can help you in the final thing that you hope to negotiate. So in this hypothetical example, I'm going to just kind of, a shoe company is really important to a lot of people, right? Because it's a high value, because they can be a top source of income, just like Shannon said. But also what you wear is important. So it's a high importance. That means the preparation that you spend on this should be a lot. Now, I'm going to give you an example because a lot of times there could be things that are high, call it high cost, but low value. And that's really fun to practice with in some of your negotiation. And I'm going to give an example because I like to share this one, because a lot of people, if something costs a lot of money, but has low value, that's what I call you take the shot. And I mean, I've done this most of my life, but it's actually a lot easier than you think. For example, I remember there was one winter where I wanted to buy some coats, but I didn't want to spend a ton of money, right? My budget was a lot lower than what I wanted to spend. So by doing research, I knew that it was at the end of the year. People try to recycle out their inventory. So I knew that the salespeople would want to get rid of their coats. So what I did is I went into Bergdorf and I basically said, I'm going to buy today, but only if I can get a great deal. And I'm buying in cash. And I went with them and said, if you can give me these 2 coats for 10% of the cost, I will buy them both right now. Now, these were super high expensive coats. And believe it or not, I walked away with both of those coats, let's say, for about 10% of the cost. I'm not saying 10% off, I'm saying 10% of the cost. Now, you can't do this for something that's really important to you and is important, because you can then insult the buyer. But in this case, I really didn't care whether I had the coats or not. So that's an example of where you can practice. So near the end of the year, find something that's super, that you really beyond your budget, but you want, but you're interested in, and you take the shot. Okay, so that's something, because practice makes perfect in the negotiation. Preparation is key for an important negotiation. And in this case, you want to think of the things in this order. In this case, what is going to be important to your counterparty? What's important to you? And a thing that people don't do enough of is finding out competitive information, because that you can use in your own, so that you understand the value that you have with these corporations. So the things that are important to the counterparty, in this case, what they want to sell shoes, of course, they want to increase their market share. And then you rank the things that are important to you. Sometimes it's just going to be different, it could be just the product, but sometimes it can be money. So you should be doing all of this prior to the negotiations actually starting, okay? You want to get competitive information. Actually talking and entering into simultaneous negotiation can help you with everything. Because as I just established earlier, when you have more power with the smaller brands than you do with the larger brands. So you want to understand what they can offer you, because at the end of the day, there should be a price that you should be willing to accept any quality person, any quality brand that can provide a product that you can use. So things that you want to try to do are try to see if you can talk to other people about examples of their contracts. Most of them won't send it to you because you're precluded, but if you have a few friends, talk to them about it. I have also learned that a lot of times people exaggerate. So the information you should do is trust but verify. And then an important source of information is you can get a lot from the annual report or the 10K, which is usually online, okay? So the 10K is a SEC document that each company has to file every year. And when you're a public company, which means you sell stock and people can buy it, is that you have to put exactly what is your business model, exactly how you're going to use sponsorships. And it's like having the answers to the test. So by knowing this information, it can be helpful for you in your negotiation. I'm going to stop for a second and see if there's any questions so far in the first two, importance and preparation. Any questions? Okay. As I said, 10Ks are an important source of information. I'll give you a story. I was talking to a person, an athlete who I was mentoring, and they were under and this person had been in the Olympics and was a successful person. And he had thought that like Nike was doing this because of the love of the sport. And I told him to read the 10K. And the 10K of Nike in the business description explains in detail how sponsoring athletes is such a core part of their mission in order to build brand awareness for the consumer market. So by reading this information and learning the importance that the different brands put on sponsorship, it empowers you. And you realize it's more just business as opposed to, oh, they're doing me a favor, because they're not doing you a favor. You all have tremendous value, and what we have to do is extract our value. For preparation, after we kind of decide what's important, we actually write this stuff down. Write this down. You rank the things that are important to you, right? These are things like, what is your ranking? How you are doing relative to your peers? You know, different things. And these are just things that you're going to use in your negotiation. The 10K should be able to give you, you know, information on budgets. It sometimes will list the different people that they currently sponsor. So can that be helpful? So in this negotiation, what you're trying to do is you are trying to give things that have high value to the counterparty that are low cost to you, right? So that could be access to athletes. It could be providing marketing and interviews. It could be Instagram posts. It could be IG lives. It could be interviews. These are the things that you want to be willing to give up and say that you'll do, so that you can receive more of what you want, which it could be cash and gear. Realizing when you have the power or not. This one is a hard one, because a lot of times, if you know, these same thing could have been said about the NBA, who has a lot of power right now. But you know, in the late 80s, early 90s, they even the playoffs weren't even live, right? So they taped them, and it was a tape delay, and they didn't have the power. So when you don't have the power, and this is what you were referring to, Jane, is a lot of times you have to adjust your strategy. What I tend to do is that's the only time when I focus on trying to draw emotion and nostalgia into this thing. A lot of times that can help you, right? And what do I say? There are many times, let's say you're in, you know, you're starting out for something, so you don't have track records, you don't have viewers, but that's when you have to call on emotion. Look, you've got a powerful story to tell. You've got, you know, and you want to do things, and you want to empower your user. You want to talk about the value you can bring to their client. You know, you've heard me talk about, when I talk to brands, about the little amount of money that goes to women in sports. And do you want to be a part of that problem? You know, and they talk about the high, yeah, there might be less people that follow them, but the engagement is so much higher. So when I don't have the power, I then use emotion in order to get what I want. And a lot of times it's letting that person come to the conclusion. I can give you a few examples. When we were first started our company in 2016, we didn't really have a track record, right? We didn't have any power with USA Track and Field. And so, you know, if I had gone in there with a hard liner with this or nothing, really, it would have probably been nothing. So what I did is to really invoke, look, we want to help change the world. Look, these athletes are trying to transition. They don't have enough people out there helping. And isn't that the function of a national governing organization? So by getting them to believe in your mission, and each of you have a mission, you can then, when you don't have the power, use that as a negotiation tool. We did the same thing for our first outside investor at EOS. Because look, when you're, again, this is a time of COVID, and people are, you know, it's the markets are doing really bad. So what we tended to do is we said, look, we really need this, but we don't, you know, we don't say we have the power. We trust you, and we lay out the case. We're passionate about it. We have done a lot of preparation, and we know what that company wants and that individual's looking for. So by doing those things, we turned a disadvantage, which we don't have any power, to get what we wanted to do. And that's kind of like negotiating with Nike. You have low power. So in those cases, what I would suggest to do in that is, in these cases, you know, like, you know, a person like, I've been with you for 14 years and I'm doing this, and you're invoking nostalgia and a journey that you're hoping will help you. There's times that you have high power too. And I'll give you that. And how do you leverage that? when I was going to business school, I wanted to go to, I didn't really want to go to Yale because they didn't have an MBA. They had what's called a Master's of Public Administration, and I didn't really want to do that. But I wanted to go to Darden, but Darden didn't offer me a scholarship, but Yale did. So that's a position when I would have been happy to go to Yale, but I used that and said, because worst cases I go to the Yale, as I said, I use that in order to get a scholarship from Darden, which is, hey, you're my first choice, but I need a scholarship. Now, what's key in these decisions in that scenario, when you have the high power and you're asking somebody to match, you have to tell them that you will accept the offer if you do it. So if I had said, hey, Darden, I want you to give me a full scholarship, but I didn't say that I'll accept it, the likelihood is less than if you make that as a conditional statement. If you match this, then I'll accept it. So that's high power. Another one is when you're negotiating with new brands. Now, the thing that you all should think about if you're negotiating with a shoe company, try looking up and finding new companies just to talk with, right? So there's databases like Crunchbase is one for small companies. And you look for small brands and you engage with those. Try to find out what you can get from those different ones, because that can be helpful to you even for the negotiating for the bigger. You're going to learn a whole lot. And worst case scenario is it's more information to use for the brands that you're really targeting. But best case is you may find out that you can get a stupendous offer. Why? Because you've reached out to them, which for them demonstrates even a greater likelihood of loyalty. Okay. The next part of this, and again, this is all part of your preparation, is to know what you're willing to walk away and accept, because a lot of times negotiations can be, they can be, people win, they think they're winning and they're losing and they get emotional. So you need to write down and know what you want. But part of that is preparation. You've got to know the market. What you don't want to do is ask for something that is clearly outside of what the market's willing to pay. So you want to know what's an acceptable value, and then you try to push to get the most that you can. Now, the caveat to that is that sometimes you can get a lot more than you want, but when you realize you're in a position of power. But when you know what you'll accept and know what you'll walk away, this is really important, and it gives you a greater likelihood that you get what you want and you don't accept something that you're going to later regret because you've written it down prior to starting. So examples are, let's say you've had a contract for the last few years where you're getting just the gear for free. And you may decide that, okay, I'm going to talk to new companies, and if I don't get some cash, that's going to be my walk away. So that's an example of something. So it's imperative that you write this stuff out and think about this prior to you starting. Okay. I talked about this, which is to take emotion out of this. Okay. And the reason is, again, particularly when you're talking about, it's easy, and I empathize with you a lot. I remember because, women's sports has been devalued. I remember just as, I remember when my ex was trying to get a job, and she was really wicked smart and was an aerospace engineer. And I remember she would go to talk to people, and they would say, oh, our minority recruiter isn't here. And I remember how they devalued her, and that made her feel bad. But we worked long and hard to take emotion out. And so she did do that, and she actually negotiated a heck of a deal. So the thing that I like to think about is that the value that they put on your contract is not the value that they put on you as a person. I want to repeat that because people don't hear that. A lot of times people equate what a person is offering them to the value that they are as a person. That couldn't be farther from the truth. They don't know you. They don't know what it takes in your drive for you to get where you are. So do not take it personally. Okay. And the reason is that can cloud your judgment. And part of the key parts of being in this negotiation is listening and trying to find out what they're willing to give you and what you can extract. And if you're emotionally involved, that's sometimes hard to get. The caveat is, again, when you don't have a lot of power and what you're trying to do is an excited emotion. I give an example here. You're trying to get a scholarship and you talk about, well, I'm the first person in my family to go to college. And that then invokes a kind of a feeling and a genuine admiration that can help you when you're not in a position of power. So you want to think about these things before that you want to use to try to get what you want. I couldn't say something that is so important and has helped me immensely through my life when I didn't have power. So tools to do this is, remember I told you, you're going to be writing out a lot of these things. And it's really good when you're on video calls because people can't see. So you can have all the notes in the world and just put them at the base of your computer and they can't see them, right? So in this case, you want to write down your responses to emotional questions about, Bill, you're just not worth that. And you'd say, well, look, I think that I want to go through my history because maybe that's not clear. I might have rushed through that for you. And you lay out all of these criteria that kind of gives them a reason to pay you or give you what you want, and you don't respond to it as an emotion and you don't try to invoke a response from them. I also try to practice these responses in front of mirrors, in front of other people. And that's important because the more confident or more relaxed that I can make my counterparty feel, the more information they're going to give me, and they're going to tell me more what is important to them or not important to them. And if they're so tense and that they don't do that, then I'm not able to have all the information I need in order to extract the best information and get the best deal for me or whoever I'm negotiating with. Deadlines, wow. Deadlines is one of the tools that can really be helpful in this because, if you don't have a deadline, what can happen is the person is really not forced to make a decision. Let's say you want you want in this case, a shoe contract. Really, they're not incentivized to push on this unless there's some things. So the questions you want to try to find out is, remember from your preparation period, is how does you negotiate to get compensated, right? Is it, I'll give you an example, like when you're buying a car, usually the commissions are paid at the end of the month. So it's the best time to buy a car at the end of the month because that car sales person will be near the end and they're going to be trying to close it in order to get to different commission levels. As much as you can try how are they doing this year, whether it's a company, whether it's a salesperson. So when you're looking at the company's reports, remember I talked about 10Ks, which are the annual reports. There's also things called 10Qs. And sometimes you can find out by your research how that company is doing. Have they signed up a lot of athletes this year? Have they been the second choice of a lot of athletes? So if you're finding out that they've done well, you're realizing that they may not, you may not have power, but if you realize that they've lost a lot of athletes, those are just good points of information that you need. What do other athletes say about them, and how were they able to use things? And what do other stakeholders say about them? All of these things are things that you're going to be using either to create a arbitrary deadline or a non-arbitrary deadline. The arbitrary deadline is just something like, I just want to buy some, you're telling the person who you're negotiating with, hey, look, I really want to get this done by November 15th because, and you really have to tell them, but I have some personal business. I have to make a choice to do this. So the example that I like to share for this is the 1998 NBA lockout. That was really an amazing case study. And what was happening is, they were doing the new collective bargaining agreement, and there was a wide, gulf between what the owners wanted and what the players were willing to accept. So it was a long time that was going back and forth. And what the owners did, which was genius, they put an arbitrary deadline out of the blue and says, if we don't get this done by, I think it was in June, we're going to cancel the season. Okay. The NBA players capitulated The owners got most everything that they wanted, and it was an arbitrary deadline. But again, deadlines can, motivate people to do something quicker than if not. So to consider that, that's another one of the big focus areas that I wanted to talk about. All right. Now we're going to go to the second example, and I really want to have some engagement on this if at all possible. So this one is, I've been asked by a number of you about speaking engagements. So, speaking engagements are one of those things where it's really hard to, different companies will ask you the different rates for the same thing. So it's great importance for a lot of you because it's the potential for making money and to value your brand. So it's high importance. So I will talk a few of different things, and then I really want to open it up to see if there's any specific questions on how to respond on negotiations. Like my preparation for just stuff like this is, you talk to speakers bureaus, you find people who have similar qualifications as you, and you find out what they get paid. You talk to your national governing organization and other athletes, right? And get that information. And again, you only want to use the information that's helping you. So for example, if somebody's offering you $1,000 and you find that other athletes are doing 500, I would not suggest that you go back and say, I'll do it for 500. It's just important information for you to know. If you're saying, oh, wow, athletes, mostly with my criteria get a lower number, you still take the higher number, but that's just good information for you to have. When you have the power, you're going to have the power a lot. If they called you and reached out to you, it's really because they want you, right? So the question is, a lot of times they may not want, or they're trying to get you onto the cheap. But then again, if you determine your walk away prior to that, because remember, you've done this preparation, then you can just, you can walk away and not feel guilty. You're taking the emotion out, because a lot of times these people who are asking you, they really don't have the information. They're just motivated by your story. They want you to talk, and they don't have a clue about what you should get paid. So take emotion out and then just try to overcome their objections, show your value by the things that you've accomplished, and then see if you can get what you want. Use the deadlines. I use arbitrary deadlines. Hey, look, I need to make this decision here because I plan out my next month or something. So all of those things are super important. Also, 5 of the things in order to do that, or 6 focus areas. So I want to open it up for a few questions. Do you all have any kind of questions that you have in your negotiation, whether it's a speaking engagement or anything specific? I'd love to try to get to help out if I could. Questions?
I have a question, Bill.
Yes.
So say you do a speaking engagement and you get an idea of the scope of work. So you give them a price, the scope of work ends up being, a lot greater than they kind of had,
Yes.
How do you handle that?
That's a great question, Lauren. What you don't do is, a lot of times what people do is they do all the work, and then after it's finished, they go back. That's not what you would do. When you're engaged with the client and you think the scope of works is A, when it starts going farther than A, then you need to stop them and say, hey, look, I'd like to talk to you. I'm super excited about this project, but I don't know if you know this, but Jane gave me a little bit more, blah, 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 blah. And in order to to meet the kind of quality you want, I'm wondering, should I not do that? Or can you pay that? You understand? You don't want to walk away. So you're going to say either I go back to my original deal, or do you want to pay me for this extra work? But you give them that option. Does that make sense, Lauren?
Yeah, that's great. I think, that comes back to like what you were talking about, knowing our value.
Yes.
And you can't just be like, it's like, oh, I'm thankful I have a paid opportunity. But if you're being taken advantage of, there's nothing wrong with speaking up.
And one of the things that you should be doing is, remember when we talked about preparation, and when you're talking to the people, you're actually writing down what their expectations are. So one of the questions I like to ask, what does success look like for you? And so when they answer those things and you write that down, then when they're asking to you is more than that, like, oh, I want you to do a workshop 2 days before, you know what I mean? You can come back to that. as opposed to if you're nebulous about what you're providing, then you can get into these kind of problems. Any other questions? Okay. So what we're probably going to do, if there's, the intention here is to try to give you all information that can make you a more effective negotiator. I went through a lot of information. So more than likely, if there's an interest, what we'll do is we'll break them down into smaller sections and smaller working groups to do this. I'm also happy to work with you all on specifics. So if you're in a specific negotiation where we can be helpful, reach out. I think you all know what Parity wants to do is to make you all better, to show the value and make more money and more opportunities. And this is just one of the reasons we do these Parity series, is to do that. So, like when we do the ones on LinkedIn, we're offering to help you do the LinkedIn profiles. For resumes, we're offering to help you doing the new resumes. For negotiations, we're willing to get there and get our hands dirty to help you in your negotiations. So you have my email address, and please reach out if I can be helpful, okay?
Adeline has a question.
Okay,
Adeline, you
Adeline.
can unmute yourself.
Hi, Bill. This is Adeline. So I had a situation, and this isn't the first time this has happened, but I just felt incredibly disrespected at the event I was at. It was a men's wrestling event, and I was the only female speaker, and they had asked me to do like 5 things, and kind of flippantly, I was like, do one of those things for the price that you're giving me. And they were like, sold. And then all of a sudden I felt like my hands were tied, and put up the event, and they had 12 male speakers and then me, and every single one of them had a slot, and mine was optional. I just felt so crushed that I just I honestly have backed away from doing so many events because I just so distraught over the fact that they just didn't value my voice or my opinion in this. Like, how dare they? And then they also, I told them I wouldn't do the wrestling clinic. They brought me to the wrestling clinic, and they're like, look at these poor little puppy-died girls. Like, I can't believe you're not doing the wrestling thing. And just shit things to me the whole time. And I didn't know how to appropriately be like, hey, this was super messed up. How dare you?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And what I would suggest, and it's not too late. How long ago did this happen? The first?
It was right after Olympics, so it was like 3 years ago.
Okay, it's still not, look, I would do a postmortem with them and say, you know what? I've been thinking a lot about, you're asking me these things, and lay out the things that that bothered you. And what you're telling them is, look, what I'm trying to do is I want more women like myself to do these in the future. But if you continue to devalue us by these things, what you're doing is you're missing out on the opportunity. You know what I mean? And you're going to just assume, like, I assume you didn't mean to do these things, but you can't fix it with me, but you can fix it going forward. And then you're very specific. What do you mean? Like, you made mine optional when you made theirs mandatory, and you go through the different things. But I would also say, Adeline, even when they took you up and said sold, sometimes it's hard at that moment, but you have to come back and say, hey, look, I was joking, and you have to address it. But I would, even as practice, Adeline, and I'm happy to help you, happy to craft a response that you can go back to them and kind of share this with. I had an example where I was negotiating for a new job, and they didn't want to give me that job because I was an African American. This was a long time ago. I was in Louisiana, and they said, "Hey, this boss says, well, I'm not sure that they can that our clients can deal with this as Bill because he's Black." This boss never told me this, but another manager told me about this. And, you can imagine how it made me feel. I eventually got the job, but then every time this racist boss gave me any feedback, I was like, well, is it because I'm Black? Is it because it's really good feedback? And I couldn't tell. So I didn't deal with it for 2 years. But when I left to go to business school, I addressed it at that point. And I said, and I went through the things and why I thought that was racist, what he did, and I addressed it. So, Adeline, I'm saying, going back may not have any effect for you, but it can make it better for other people going forward.
You sure they're just not ready?
Huh?
I feel like some people aren't ready to embrace certain progressive, which is
Yeah.
race and gender is progressive, but
Yes.
they just seem so far behind.
I'm
like
with
you're-
you. And it might be too, but you don't own that responsibility. You understand? What you're doing is you're being, you know, all the tenacity and strength that got you where you are as an athlete, you're going to use that to make it better for the next generation of female athletes. And these are the kinds of things that you have to do. And again, leverage a person like myself. I love a battle. I'm happy to help you do this. I'll help you practice. I'll help you write it. I love this kind of stuff. So take me up on it, okay? Any other questions?
I just wanted to jump in. This is Kara, and say that I've learned a lot in talking with Bill in other scenarios as well, but about the emotional part, like taking emotion out of it. I think that a lot of times as female athletes, we apply taking emotion out of it to like how someone else is going to say stuff to us. But what has really helped me is to understand that like taking the emotion that I have about my own worth out of objectively valuing the things that I've accomplished in approaching a negotiation is like even more valuable to me. So like I've taken the taking emotion out of it internal first step, and it's been super helpful to be like, I am worth this stuff, even if I like want to be worth more subjectively in terms of my own goals and stuff like that. But like there's kind of two different emotions tied to negotiation, and I just kind of wanted to point that out because it's been a winding route to get there.
Well, I will also say that the more prep, you know, when you write these things down objectively of the accomplishments that you have done, and as it's easier to overcome things, you know what I'm saying? So you can, it's easier, you know, Jana, with a PWHPA, for example, if you look at all of the, you know, the awards that your members have won and these different things, objectively, there's no reason why this shouldn't be a tremendous success, even though it's in its infancy. So the more that you have objective things that have accomplishments of this organization and this association, you use those to invoke an emotion that people want to pay you for.
Hi, Bill.
Hello.
Hi. Sorry, it's my first time on Zoom. It's very exciting.
Okay.
Bill, I have to ask, I am routinely offered less than men. And I do my homework. I go to these meetings. I know what the guys are making. I know what I bring to the table. I know most of the time I bring more.
Yeah.
And I will work on the emotional response, because I'll admit I have blown it plenty of times with what I've said in the moment. Do you have any key phrases that we can use when things go south?
Yes. One of the things that I like to say is, assume, even when you know that the person, let's say in the worst case, is a sexist pig, let's just take that word. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to say, hey, look, I need you to help me understand. And then you lay out the facts. I said, hey, I need you to help me understand, because I know that you're not, you know, I'm assuming that you want to pay me the fair rate, but I'm saying my understanding is that you paid these three people this, and you're offering me this. Can you help me kind of bridge the gap? What is the difference of what you heard them offer you versus what you heard me offer you? Because it seems to me that I should be getting that also. So can you help me understand that?
Thank you. That's a great tip. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and it's look, you know, it's hard. It's hard, and I don't want you all to hear that it's not hard. And another example that I use is I've been stopped 50 times by the police, and it is so irritating. You know, I have a 30-year-old kid who still remembers, you know, the time the officer pulled a gun on me, and I now, when I get stopped, I assume that every police officer is racist. And a lot of you have dealt with such many sexists, but you can't assume everyone is a sexist. Like I cannot assume every police officer is racist. So you kind of let them, you have to simmer it down and hear their response, even though, you have to be ready. You know what I mean? So I know it's hard because so often you've all been so devalued, but you know what? All you need is a few good folks to do it and to change the world. And that's, and we're here to help you to try to change the world and give you some tools to help.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I think that's a good point, because the next person you negotiate has no idea how the last negotiation went.
Yes,
And so
that's right.
sometimes you got to fake it till you make it.
Yes, that's exactly right. And a lot of times you have to give them the information in order to come to the same conclusion that you come to. And a lot of times they don't have that. So even even those people who don't know have to sometimes be educated. And a person who wants to be educated will take that information and get better. Any other questions? Well, great. I really appreciate you all participating. And if you have any questions, you can send them to me. And I'm being sincere about this. I want to help. And if you have any specifics on the negotiations that I can be helpful with, please reach out, any of us at Parity, or you can ask Kara or Lauren or Shannon to forward something to me if you don't want to reach out directly. All right. So thanks everybody today. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.